Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves released in 2023 to generally decent reviews. Nerds seem to enjoy the references to the tabletop game, and normies seem to enjoy it as a lighthearted romp, akin to the love child of Harry Potter and the Marvel movies. It should be mentioned that I am one of the dice-rolling, character sheet-making, initiative-rolling nerds that enjoy tabletop RPGs. Except I play Pathfinder, because I'm not afraid of 3rd grade math. I didn't watch the movie when it came out for any number of reasons. Maybe it was my staunch devotion to what is clearly the superior TTRPG. Maybe I considered it a thinly veiled attempt to separate fans from their money without regard for the original IP. Maybe it was a third reason that I can't think of right now. Suffice to say, I didn't watch the movie and lost no sleep over the matter, but the D&D movie was recently added to the Netflix catalog, so I figured why the hell not. The movie follows the story of a character whose name I genuinely don't remember, even though I watched the movie literally yesterday. I don't remember his name because I gave him a better one in my head, Bardpool. I gave him that name because he's a bard that talks like Deadpool. At the start of the movie, Bardpool was essentially the fantasy equivalent of a cop. Some bad guys killed his wife, and he stopped being a cop and became a criminal to feed his daughter or something. Not like a violent criminal, but like a nice criminal. A nice criminal who never hurts anyone physically and just sort of pushes the fact that he's robbing people from his mind. He's a protagonist after all. Before long, Mr. Bardpool makes some friends to help him in his criminal endeavors, and eventually this crime ring comes to learn of an amulet that can bring folks back from the dead. Mrs. Bardpool is dead, so it checks out that Mr. Bardpool wants that amulet, and so the party seeks to steal the amulet, but it doesn't go as planned, leading Bardpool and his barbarian friend, aka the best character in the movie, to be captured and sent to prison. Before he is captured though, Bardpool asks Hugh Grant to look after his kid, and Mr. Grant agrees. We are now in the future, where Bardpool and Bestie break out of prison and set out to retrieve baby Bardpool from Hugh Grant, who is now apparently the mayor. In this scene, we learn that it was Hugh Grant that betrayed Bardpool and Bestie and got them sent to prison, earning him the moniker Batty. Batty tries to get Bardpool and Bestie sent back to prison, but opts to keep caring for baby Bardpool because he's so enamored with the joys of fatherhood or something like that. After they escape, the duo decide that they're going to steal the amulet back from Batty and rescue baby Bardpool from the clutches of Batty, but they do need to get a team together. Eventually, the duo becomes a group of 4 when Bardpool and Bestie recruit Druid and Sorcerer. These two don't get cool nicknames. Their nicknames are their classes. Deal with it. Druid turns into a fly and learns that there is no way into the vault because it is protected by some sort of unbreakable enchantment. Mordenkainen something or other, I don't know D&D lore. I play Pathfinder. Sorcerer points out that the only way to get past this enchantment is with some magical hat, so the party goes out to get the hat. What precedes is an action-packed debacle with some other guy that is really only relevant to this section of the story that culminates in the party eventually getting the hat. The only issue is that Sorcerer can't attune to the hat, so it's functionally useless. The party gets all mad at Bardpool because he knew this would happen, but eventually they have a heartwarming forgiveness session and form a new plan, using the portal staff that they found on the quest for the hat. The party does a heist, but like a really shitty heist, and they get caught. Instead of being executed, they are entered into this vague Triwizard tournament type thing that is never really properly explained, but just serves as a mechanism to illustrate that there is a bunch of money in Batty's vault, because apparently bougie folks like to bet on this nebulous tournament thing or something. Anyway, according to Batty, the party will probably die in the Triwizard tournament. They don't though. Instead, they escape the tournament grounds and steal Batty's boat that contains all the gold he was stealing from ye old yuppies. All is good until the party sees some sort of tentacle thing hovering over the tournament grounds, and they decide that it is their duty to save the city instead of absconding with all of the riches. Turns out, Batty wasn't the real Batty. It was the wizard lady. Shocking, I know. She's some sort of red wizard, never explained, who wants to turn the whole city into zombies or something, also never really explained. Regardless of the lack of explanation as to who she is or why she is doing this, the party fights Batty number 2 and eventually prevail. Unfortunately, during the aforementioned fight, Bestie got stabbed and is dying. Bardpool has the amulet that can resurrect people, and instead of using it on his dead wife like he had previously planned, he uses it to resurrect his bestie, and everyone lives happily ever after. From my flippant synopsis, one could potentially infer that I did not care for this movie, and that's not entirely true. Honor Among Thieves is nothing if not mildly entertaining. My feelings on this movie can be summed up with one image: the fat dragon. Out of context, this chonky dragon is pretty funny. I mean, look at him. It's a fat dragon, what's not to love? The writing of this movie is quippy and genuinely funny at times. The plot leaves a bit to be desired, but who cares? There's a morbidly obese dragon. Any appeal that this movie has doesn't come from its intrigue or profundity or anything of that nature. It comes from the fact that it follows a comfortably predictable story with no real stakes that gives some laughs along the way. Whether or not that formula works in a fantasy setting is somewhat up to viewer discretion. Another notable good thing about this movie is the aesthetic. I don't necessarily mean its special effects, which are somewhat hit or miss, but more the general visuals. More often than not, the scenes pay tribute to one classic fantasy trope or another. There's a part in the movie where the characters are traveling from somewhere to somewhere else, and as they do, we are shown these wide shots of varying fantasy landscapes. It's never really all that relevant to the plot, but each of these shots is unique and cool and feels like somewhere a party of imaginary adventurers would go. And look, there's an owlbear, like from the game! The thing that I most disliked about this movie is the tone. Let's go back to the fat dragon. Yes, the dragon is fat, and that's hilarious. But moments like this undercut any stakes that the plot might have. When every single moment in an adventure movie is played for laughs, it ceases to become an adventure movie and just becomes a comedy. That isn't to say that there isn't a time and place for levity and adventure, but this movie believes that to be all of the time and in all of the places. If the characters aren't taking the danger that they're in seriously, why should the audience? The action sequences are cool enough, but they feel like the old G.I. Joe cartoons where a plane would get shot down and the animator would make a point of showing the pilot parachuting to safety to prove that no one ever really dies or the good guys don't kill people. This leads to all of the fight scenes feeling more like a Three Stooges ripoff than a legitimate fight. Don't worry, kids, even though the barbarian lady has a large axe, she's just gonna bonk the bad guys on the noggin, not chop them in half, because that's how axes work. The combination of dialogue and nerfed action sequences gives the plot an overtone of who the fuck cares. The protagonist doesn't because he's too busy trying to be Ryan Reynolds. The supporting characters don't because their only sources of characterization is what their classes are. Maybe the antagonist cares, but the heroes have +5 plot armor, so we all know that the baddies will eventually fail. Where are the stakes in any of this? That isn't to say that all fantasy films need to be Game of Thrones level of violent and gory, or anything like that. I've gotten through this entire video without mentioning Lord of the Rings, which is uncharacteristic because I really like talking about Lord of the Rings. But Christ, man, just do that! Or something closer to that than this movie is doing. Show your characters actually care about what they're doing, rather than having them spout a quip every 10 seconds. Whether or not a movie is worth a watch is entirely dependent on what one is looking to get out of the experience. If you're looking to turn your brain off for about 2.25 hours and get a couple of laughs while watching people do fantasy things, this movie might be worth your time. You won't get any profound takeaways or experience stunning visuals or fall in love with deep, nuanced characters or anything like that, but you'll probably have an enjoyable enough time if you enjoy fat dragons.